Hi, and welcome to Raisina 2025. We're here at The Spot. We're here to speak about cryptocurrencies in Africa. And with me, I have Titus Bawuah, who's from the Web3 Africa organization, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about crypto in Africa. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd love to hear about Web3 Africa. What is it all about? What do you do?
So the vision for Web3 Africa Group is essentially to contribute in developing the infrastructure of Web3 on the continent. We spotted an opportunity maybe 5 years ago on the potential in Africa's GDP in the future.
Yeah.
And we feel like the Web3, and when I say Web3, specifically blockchain, cryptocurrencies, AI, and gaming will all contribute towards the prosperity of Africa economically over the next decade and beyond. And so we spotted that opportunity and decided that we would work towards building and working with institutions, the local creators, entrepreneurs, in making that a reality. And fast forward, we're at a place where we've started very strongly with Ghana, and we'll be moving into 10 key markets over the next decade.
So I understand you also build infrastructure. Could you give us an example of what kind of infrastructure you build and where?
Yeah, so for example, what we have in Ghana, where I would say it's from the bottom up, we have a situation where we've established very strong agreements with the Central Bank of Ghana. Policy is key to infrastructure because typically what you have is the policy is either moving very slow and the innovation is moving fast, or the innovation is moving very slow and the policy is moving fast. But what situation we are now in Ghana is we've got the first layer of our policy framework in place. Education is in place as well. We have chain link agreements with one of the top cryptocurrency exchanges in the world as well. And now we're in a situation where we're started to consolidate the data, not just from a consumer perspective, but from a commercial level where other financial institutions can potentially plug into what we've established.
So could you tell me a little bit more about this policy? How can crypto be deregulated, or how can governments create the policy pathways to bring crypto into the economy?
So I don't know if deregulation is the right way to look at it, opposed to collaboration, right?
Great.
Neither one can exist without the other, right? And so typically there's this, mantra around crypto bros, right? And so crypto bros have their own ideology, the way that they want to do things. They don't want to work with government. We rebel against government. I would say we've got more of a hybrid experience. And typically I would say it works better for this industry for there to be collaboration with institutional governments. Why? Because some of the government infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure that we have has been there. We've come to meet it, right? It has to evolve, but at the same time, they need to look at the future. And I believe that crypto is the future. And so, collaborative efforts around understanding what the right form of regulation is probably better than none at all.
Yes. Yeah. And that would involve, I imagine, collaboration with the gaming community, with artificial intelligence experts, etc. What are the ways that you are collaboratively engaging the stakeholders to make Web3 a reality?
On our side, when we set out on the path of building W3A, we engaged with the Central Bank of Ghana. And when we did, the first thing we said to them is there needs to be a working group between ourselves, the local Web3 community, and the central bank. They were very receptive. The working group was created, and basically the whole objective of that working group was to spar and put ideas into a trusted, decentralized group where we could all basically share what our thoughts were on what a credible crypto industry could look like in Africa. Fast forward where are we today? As I said, we have the first draft, we have the first policy framework, and in that working group had everyone from the central bank, it had some banks, it had some startups and established entities in there to have a very kind of, fair, robust view of what it would take to build this industry.
So if the regulation is all in order and the government's ready, how do you get the regular society, people who are not aware of crypto or blockchain or any of this, how do you tell them, hey, you should use this in your business, you should use this in your day-to-day life? How do you envision this next chapter after regulation is?
I mean, I don't think you tell them. I think you solve their problems, right? You go in to actually solve day-to-day problems of normal people. We don't want a world where people have to, it should be seamless, right? When you're using your credit card now, when you're paying for stuff, you're sending money, it's straightforward, right? That's what the Web3 or crypto industry should look like a decade from now, where people don't feel as if they're having to, because not everyone's like digitally literate.
Right.
That's no offense to anybody. It's just, we all have our strengths as humans, and the objective is to make the society function more efficiently. That would be what defines crypto as a successful industry, is when the normal person can use it without knowing they're using it.
So give me an example of that for our audience. When you say, I'm solving a particular problem, it's seamless in your life. Describe this scenario. What does it look like? What is somebody purchasing? How are they purchasing it? Just give an example to bring it to life.
To bring it to life. Okay, so I'll use emerging economies, right? The bankless as a prime example.
Yes.
And so in Africa, you have mobile money, right? People transfer money from one phone to another via text message, right? And then there's a intermediary vendor in the middle. What potentially can happen now in Africa is you have problems on trade from one African country to another because there isn't a harmonious financial ecosystem for the currencies basically to be easily exchanged between different countries. You have the Francophone countries, you have the Anglophone countries, and then you have this disjointment between the foreign central banks and the local central banks. And so what needs to happen is you have a stable coin, or CBDCs, if you want to call it that.
Central-backed digital currency.
Central-backed digital currencies. And the objective is African countries that are already using existing infrastructure like mobile money would have an additional element to it around stable coins, which is backed against local resource. And you are able to send money from Ghana to Nigeria or from Nigeria to the Ivory Coast, right? Backed with a commodity or a resource that we all can trust in Africa. That would be a very good example of how, digital currencies could work on the continent.
So as you're saying that, cross-border transactions and it being leveraged, for example, in businesses, have you started looking at the policy aspects of trying to get it coordinated with taxation?
I mean, definitely in our conversations with the Central Bank of Ghana, that's like being key. Because the other thing about this as well is it isn't only purely for the benefit of some entrepreneurs and companies. It's at large to give sovereignty, right?
That's correct.
Right. And so how do you do that? You're only going to be able to do that effectively if you are in a position where you're clawing back, a certain level of revenue that could be used to develop, whether it's education, whether it's making sure that the infrastructure is more robust and innovative. And as I said, in my view, education is the key component, right?
Could you expand on that? Because you say education. Are you talking about it in elementary, middle school, high school? Are you talking about it in college? Are you talking about it like public education in general? What aspects?
No, I mean really from the ground up. So I believe that in order for us, I always say this every single time, we need to be where the ball is going to be. And so what you need to do is you need to look a decade into the horizon. And if you want to have an economy that you have, a majority of the world's youth is in Africa. So if you want to have an economy that's advanced, We need to start educating and implementing it into the curriculum now, right? So that in 10 years' time, those students will become creators, entrepreneurs, or professionals that are helping to build that industry that you envision.
And does Web3 Africa offer education on their website?
So one of the key things that we do offer education, but one of the key things that we do is with our dialogue with the central bank, we have created programs that makes it very, very seamless for people that don't understand the industry to come into and get certification, right? To advance their knowledge on what it means to be in this industry.
So if we have people all over the world already watching, so what would they want to kind of do with you if they had some interest? Like, is there a way to collaborate with you? Pretend they're in Latin America or they're in Asia or in Europe. Is there a way to collaborate with you? How do you deal with others outside of Africa?
Yeah, so we have a community. The community is open to all, right? As you can imagine, predominantly comes from Africa because that's where we are.
Yeah.
But people can get onto the community. They can showcase their projects. They can communicate with other people in the community. And the objective is for you to not only promote, but also educate, understand, and also eventually get to a point where if you have something that needs support, our entity will support it.
So what advice would you give people who want to do something in Web3, who want to emulate what you're doing, but don't know where to start? And they don't necessarily, they could be somewhere in Africa or elsewhere. What steps should they take to kind of get their Web3 community in their city or country activated?
I think the first thing is to really understand what problems in your society Web3 could fix. Because Web3 doesn't fix everything, right? And it won't fix everything. And so you don't want this to be a trend. What you want to do is you want to understand why you're getting into it.
Yes.
Once you understand why you're getting into it and you understand the problems that you want to fix, then you're going to be in a situation you know what to learn, right? Fundamentally, I always say, it'd be good for people to understand, the most important document is in this, which is the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper. But beyond that, you're going to read it several times. It's going to look like hieroglyphics the first time you read it. And then after that, it becomes easier with more experience and more knowledge. And so I would say, identify the problem. Then you know what to educate yourself on. Then you know what to fix. Then you know how to go forward.
That's an excellent plan. And a final question for you. You said you have to look 10 years into the future. Could you look 10 years into the future for us and tell us, what does that look like?
What that looks like is, I believe we have a world where there will be very clear policy for cryptocurrencies globally. I believe that's going to be led by America, as you can see with the current administration. And that is going to shift the way that globally financial institutions basically work with one another. And then out of that, there'll be some really good established companies that come out of that. I also think it's going to heavily influence the job market in a major way. And I do see more CBDCs coming out of Africa. And ultimately, the implementation of cryptocurrencies in central bank treasuries is a thing.
Yes.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
It's going to continue. And I believe that merchants will start to accept cryptocurrency as a common form of payment within the next decade. And then lastly, I also think there's going to be very unique ways of KYC being conducted globally as a consequence of cryptocurrencies. And so at a basis, that's the kind of future that I see. But go further than that, I think that the currency, the financial system as we know it now will be heavily disrupted, and we are going to be primarily using decentralized digital assets.
That's an exciting future. Thank you so much for sharing and all the advice you gave.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.